ClassPath resource not found when running as jar introduction. A very common issue in Spring Boot is ClassPath resource not found, or similar errors such as file not found exception. Cannot find resource ClassPathResource ... cannot be opened because it does not exist. This problem often appears in a situation like this. The code works in IntelliJ or Eclipse. The application runs correctly during development, but after packaging as a jar, the file cannot be found. This confuses many developers because the file seems to exist in the project. The main reason is that resources behave differently inside a packaged jar than in a normal file system. Understanding this issue is important because it helps you load files correctly from src.main.resources, avoid path mistakes, understand ClassPath behavior, make your Spring Boot app work both locally and after packaging. This is a very practical Spring Boot runtime issue. What does ClassPathResource not found when running as jar mean? It means your application is trying to load a file from the ClassPath, but after packaging into a jar, Spring Boot cannot find or open that resource. In simple terms, application expects a resource file, means package jar runs, means resource lookup fails. Example concept. Works in IDE means packaged as jar, means resource path fails. Why this happens? During development, your project files may look like normal folders on your machine. src main resources data sample.txt. But when the app is packaged as a jar, that file is no longer a regular file path. It becomes part of the jar content. Example concept. Development mode means file exists in folder. Jar mode means file exists inside archive. So, code that depends on file system access may work locally, but fail in the jar. What is a ClassPath resource? A ClassPath resource is a file included in your application's runtime ClassPath. In Spring Boot, files in this folder are usually ClassPath resources. src main resources. Examples: application.properties, data sample.txt, templates.email.html, config.default.json. Example concept. src main resources file.txt means ClassPath file.txt. If a file is not properly packaged into the ClassPath, it cannot be found at runtime. Common error messages. You may see errors like ClassPath resource data sample text cannot be opened because it does not exist, or java.io file not found exception, or cannot find ClassPath resource. Example concept. Spring tries to load resource means lookup fails means exception thrown. Most common cause, wrong path. One of the biggest reasons is using the wrong ClassPath path. Example file location. src main resources data sample.txt. Correct loading. New ClassPath resource data sample.txt. Common wrong versions. New ClassPath resource / source main resources data sample.txt. New ClassPath resource / source main resources data sample.txt. New file / source main resources data sample.txt. Example concept. ClassPath path equals project folder path. Inside the application, you should usually use the path relative to resources. Another common cause, using file instead of InputStream. This is one of the most important causes. Problematic code ClassPathResource equals new ClassPathResource data sample.txt. File equals resource.getFile. This may work in the IDE, but inside a jar, the resource is not a normal file on disk. So this can fail. Example concept. IDE run means looks like file jar run, means resources inside archive, not normal file. Correct approach. Use resource get InputStream instead of resource.getFile. Correct way to read a ClassPath resource example using ClassPath resource import org.springframework.core.io.ClassPathResource. Import java.io.bufferedReader. Import java.io.InputStreamReader. Import java.nio.charset.standard charsets. Public class file service. Public string read file. Throws exception. ClassPathResource equals new ClassPathResource. Data sample.txt. Try. Buffered reader equals new buffered reader. New InputStream reader resource get InputStream. Standard charsets UTF-ET8. String builder content equals new string builder. String line. While line equals reader read line is not null. Content.append line.append n. Return content.toString. Example concept. ClassPathResource means InputStream means read content safely. This works much better in packaged jar applications. Wrong assumption. Using src main resources at runtime. A very common mistake is this. New file src main resources data sample.txt. Why this is wrong. src main resources is a source folder. It exists during development. It is not guaranteed to exist after packaging. Example concept. Build time folder equals runtime resource location. When running the jar, your app should not depend on the source folder path. How Spring Boot packages resources. When you run mvn clean package, Spring Boot copies files from src main resources into the application jar. Example concept. Resources folder means packaged into jar, means loaded from ClassPath. So, your code should think in terms of ClassPath access, not direct local folder access. Example of correct resource paths. If your project contains src main resources sample.txt, use new ClassPath resource sample.txt. If your project contains ... src main resources data sample.txt, use new ClassPath resource data sample.txt. If your project contains src main resources templates email welcome.html, use new ClassPath resource templates email welcome.html. Example concept. Path starts relative to resources root using getResource as stream. Another reliable method is InputStream equals getClassLoader getResource as stream.data sample.txt. Full example. Import Java IO buffered reader. Import Java IO InputStream. Import Java IO InputStream reader. Import Java IO charset standard charsets. Public class file service. Public string read file throws exception. InputStream is getClass.getClassLoader.getResourceAsStream data sample.txt. If InputStream equal null, throw new runtime exception resource not found data sample.txt. Try buffered reader equals new buffered reader new InputStream reader InputStream standard charsets UTF-8. String builder result equals new string builder. String line. While line equals reader.readLine equals null, result append line, append n. Return result to string. Got you. Example concept. ClassLoader means resource stream means safe access in jar. Another cause, resource not included in the build. Sometimes the code is correct, but the resource was never included in the jar. Possible reasons. File placed in wrong folder. Build configuration excludes it. Custom Maven Gradle setup skips resources. File generated elsewhere and not copied. Correct location is usually src main resources. Example concept. Not packaged into jar means cannot be found at runtime. How to check if the resource is inside the jar. You can inspect the jar contents. Example command. Jar tf your app.jar. Then look for your file. Example expected output. Boot in f classes data sample.txt. If the file is not there, it was not packaged. Example concept. File missing in jar means runtime resource lookup must fail. Another cause, wrong leading slash. Sometimes developers mix path styles. For example, getClass, getClassLoader, getResourceAsStream, data sample text usually uses data sample txt, not data sample.text. Depending on the API, leading slash behavior differs. Example concept. Different APIs handle differently. So, it is important to use the correct format for the specific loading method. Spring style example with resource loader. Import org springframework.beans.factory.animation.autoide. Import org springframework.core.io.resource. Import org springframework.core.io.resource-loader. Import org springframework.stereotype.service. Import Java, Neo, charset, standard charsets. At service, public class, file service. Adderteride, private resource loader, resource loader. Public string, read file, throws exception. Resource equals resource loader.getResource. ClassPath data sample.txt. Bytes able to resource. .getInputStream. Read all bytes. Return new string bytes. Standard charsets UTF-8. Example concept. ClassPath prefix means Spring resolves resource from ClassPath. This is a clean, Spring-friendly approach. Real-world failure scenario. Suppose you write file equals new file src main resources data sample.txt. This works in your IDE because the project folder exists. Then you package the app. java-jar app.jar. Now the app runs from the jar, not from the source project structure. The folder path. src main resources data sample.txt does not exist in the same way. So the file is not found. Example concept. Local source path works in dev means fails in package deployment. Best practices to avoid this problem. Best practices include store internal files in src main resources, use ClassPath-based loading, prefer InputStream, avoid file for packaged resources, verify the correct relative resource path, inspect the jar if needed, keep resource loading logic consistent across environments. Example concept. ClassPath thinking means reliable resource loading. Common fixes. Fix 1. Move file to resources. Put file in src main resources instead of some random folder. Fix 2. Use correct path. Use new ClassPathResource data sample.txt, not project path references. Fix 3. Use getInputStream. Use resource.getInputStream, not resource.getFile. Fix 4. Verify packaging. Check jar content with jar tf app.jar. Fix 5. Use ClassPath with Spring APIs. Example. Resource loader.getResource ClassPath data sample.txt. Advantages of understanding this problem. Once you understand this issue, you can write deployment-safe code, avoid environment-specific bugs, load templates and config files correctly, debug resource problems faster, package Spring Boot apps more confidently. Example concept. Better ClassPath knowledge means fewer runtime failures challenges. This topic is confusing because local development can hide the real issue. Files look normal in the project folder. Package jar changes how resources are accessed. Different APIs use slightly different path rules. Example concept. Looks like file system problem means actually ClassPath packaging problem. Concepts learned. By learning this topic, you understand why a ClassPath resource may work in IDE but fail in jar. Why src tash main resources is not a runtime file path. Why getFile can fail in packaged apps. Why InputStream is the safer solution. How to use ClassPathResource correctly. How to verify if a resource is packaged inside the jar. Simple definition. ClassPathResource not found when running as jar. A runtime problem where a Spring Boot application cannot find or open a resource from the ClassPath after packaging. usually because of wrong pack usage or incorrect file access logic. Final summary. The error ClassPathResource not found when running as jar usually happens because the application is trying to access a packaged resource as if it were a normal file. During development, files in src/main/resources may appear easy to access, but in a packaged Spring Boot jar, they are loaded from the ClassPath inside the archive. The safest solution is to keep files in src main resources. Load them using ClassPath-based APIs. Use InputStream instead of file. Verify the resource path carefully. Once you understand this, your Spring Boot application will read internal resources correctly, both in development and in production jar deployments.